YouTube? Hefe coming to you, Captain Awesome's Fish Room, Jeff Chromus Robot, bringing y'all a video today. You can see all my junk in the background that we all collect inside this hobby. I'm going to kind of go over a few points about planted tanks. You know, sometimes they can be frustrating and stuff, and you know, I'm going to give you a few things to look for and to do in order to get it all back in balance, because there's three things that make a planted tank in balance. Okay, there's your lighting, there's your CO2, and then there's your nutrients. Okay, now a lot of people will say that you don't need CO2 to grow plants. You may not need injected CO2, guys, but I'm telling you, plants will only photosynthesize with CO2. Now, whether that's in a minimum amount of CO2 or, you know, injected of CO2, DIY CO2, whatever, that's still an essential part of a plant photosynthesizing. So, whenever you hear you don't need CO2 to grow these plants and people are keeping fish inside of those tanks, I promise you that there's some form of CO2, whether it be a carbon-based supplement like Excel or something like that. The fish respire CO2, so some form of CO2 is inside of that tank. Otherwise, the plants wouldn't photosynthesize. It's just a fact, guys. It's a fact. You have to have CO2 for the plants to photosynthesize. Now, we all know about nutrients and plants taking up nutrients and stuff like that. So I'm going to point out a few things inside of the subscriber 50 long planted tank. Okay. Now I've been having some issues in here, and I figured out what the issues were, and I'm going to share them with you so you don't have to make that same mistake. Or if you've already made that same mistake and you're experiencing some of the things that I'm experiencing now, you'll know some of the steps to take. Now, they may not be exactly the steps that I had to take to fix the issue. But you'll have a basic guideline of what to go to. So, with that said, take a look at this awesomeness, and we'll be right back. We'll jump right into it, and we'll get you some help. Peace. Okay guys, jumping right into it. I don't want to make the video too terribly long, but you can see that I have some algae growth in there. Okay, now I'm going to try to find a spot of some brown algae that I was dealing with. I pretty much got it all out. You can see some of it right back there. It looks black, but it's actually a light brown color. Here's a better example right in there, if I can get it to focus. Right there, you see? Okay, now that comes whenever you fix your problem. Now, the algae that grows to where you notice you have a problem, besides blackbeard algae, which isn't the case here, this is actually a green, kind of stringy algae. It's showing up black, but we all know how blackbeard algae looks, and that's obviously not blackbeard algae. It's a long, dark, stringy type of algae. It's not blackbeard, I promise you. Okay, but whenever you start seeing stuff like that, take into consideration a few things that you have going on your planted tank, okay? Light intensity, your nutrients, and your CO2 injection method, okay? Whether that be Excel or some other kind of carbon source to put inside of your tank for CO2, it can be any one of those things, okay? So you have to look at all of them. Now, say that you have a planted tank with more low light and you're trying to grow higher light plants like HC here, and a few other plants that I have in here like Blixa japonica. Say you're trying to grow some of those, so you compensate with the low lighting that you have and you add more CO2. It doesn't work that way, guys. It has to be a balance of all three. Or say that you have a lower light and, you know, you're relying on, you know, the carbon sources that you already have inside of your tank, and, you know, you're going to overdose with supplements in order to, you know, achieve the growth that you want. It doesn't work that way either. All three of these things have to be in balance in order for your planted tank to thrive and look beautiful, okay? Now, you know, you have these dirted tanks where, you know, they don't say use CO2 or anything like that, guys, but there's a carbon source inside of that dirt that that aquarium is using as a CO2 source or carbon source. That's what I'm talking about when I say a carbon source, okay? Now, what I did is the light was originally that high from the tank. Well, what I did is I dropped the light, as y'all saw in the previous videos, to about right there. So the light intensity actually got brighter inside of the tank. Now with that, I knew that I had to up my CO2 because the plants taking in that much light and photosynthesizing are going to need more CO2 in order to photosynthesize correctly, lushly, and just look vibrant and beautiful for you. So I upped the CO2. Now the problem I ran into, guys, is it was just too much light. I could not put enough CO2 into this tank to, you know, complement the light that I had in there. So I found my problem. It was a relatively easy problem to find because it started doing that right after I lowered the lighting system. So I rose the light back up, okay? Now within a few days, that algae that you see growing on rocks right there and stuff like that, it actually started turning brown and started detaching itself. Okay, now it's not going to be an overnight fix. This is going to take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you know, maybe even longer to actually fix and get it back to the point where it was, alright? Now, what I'm doing now is I'm trying to do cleanup on it. Now, I did a very large water change to kind of get the system back at a baseline, per se. And in doing that, I take out a bunch of the nutrients that are inside of the water column so I can, like I said, have a baseline. Now, I put my CO2 back to where I had it, almost 2 bubbles per second. You can kind of see them pumping right there, okay? And, of course, I already mentioned that I raised my light back up to where the intensity wasn't so high. Now, you might say, well, wouldn't light intensity be better? Yes, in some cases, if you can keep up the CO2 injection, but I'm telling you guys, I have 4 high output T5s that were, I mean, literally this high above the tank, and that's a lot of light. Now that's why you see people whenever they, you know, hang their metal halides or LEDs and stuff like that, that's why they're a little bit higher of the tank. Now I lowered it because I was impatient. I wanted it all to fill in faster. And in doing that, I actually messed up my system, got it out of balance, and stuff like that. Now, so in doing so and raising the light and lowering my CO2, I'm actually getting close to back where I was. Now, like I said, it's going to take a few weeks, but like I said, the algae is already starting to brown off and detach itself. It ends up on the little, you know, standpipe grate I have in there because the fish I have in here are so small. Check this guy out, by the way. That's a Malabar dwarf puffer right there. Really, really cool fish. I'm actually going to try spawning these guys. I believe I have 1 male and 3 females, so I'm pretty excited about that because it's a perfect ratio to try to breed them guys. So, you know, that's a tip for you guys. If you're setting up a planted tank and you know, you're deciding, well, I don't have CO2 yet, so I'm just going to provide high light and good nutrients, and, you know, it's not going to work that way, guys. You have to have a balance inside of a planted tank, or it's just not going to work. Or it may look good for a while, but down the road, you're going to incur problems like algae growth, blackbeard algae, string algae, green spot algae, diatoms and stuff like that. Now with any new system you're probably going to experience diatoms, but that's why I waited a while before I actually started planting it. I got the diatoms out of the way and they're pretty much gone, you know, out of the picture for now. So that's a few tips for you guys. You want to have a balance between those three things: nutrients, CO2, and lighting. All of those have to be in balance with each other in order to have a lush, vibrant, healthy, lush system. It's just as simple as that. You can't compensate for one if you're lacking on the other. You can't be lacking on the other and then compensate for a completely different one. You can't compensate for one lacking and just bump up the level of the two others, okay? You have to have those in complete harmony and, you know, just complementing themselves. You have to have all three of them complementing together in order to achieve a lush, healthy planted tank. And, you know, to those low-tech people out there that are going to argue and say, you don't need CO2, I don't use CO2. I promise you, you have some sort of carbon inside of your tank that is providing your plants with that carbon dioxide that they need. Okay, whether it be the fish that you have in there respiring, whether it be some kind of carbon source that you're using that's inside of your substrate, whether you're dosing Excel or... Yeah, I guarantee you have some sort of carbon source inside of your tank in order for you to have a lush growth, and you have it in balance, so more power to you guys. But when you're running a high-powered tank, it's even more important to have all three of those things in check and in sync with each other to, you know, just have a great planted tank. And as you can see, after the water change and after pulling out a lot of that dead and or dying off algae, looks 100 times better than the videos before. It doesn't have that brown tinge to it. It doesn't have that kind of, you know, blah blah look to it. Check out these pygmy cories, by the way, guys. There's actually 4 of them in here. The 4 that made it are doing exceptionally well. Phoenix rasboras. Let me try to get a focus on these guys. These things are gorgeous, just gorgeous. Try. You can kind of get the pictures. They have these beautiful red patterns and stuff on them. And then of course we got the super red plecos back there. And then check out these two guys coming around. Say hi. But with that said, guys, I hope y'all enjoyed today's video. I hope I was able to help some people out that had some questions about planted tanks and balance and stuff like that, guys. It's not necessarily just the balance of your substrate and then just highly planting it and stuff like that. And another problem was it's a newly set up tank and it's newly planted. So a lot of these plants haven't even fully rooted yet and started growing to their full potential. And I just got a little overzealous with it, dropped the light, and just had way too much light in there. I couldn't even keep up with the CO2 production. And, you know, any of those things out of whack are going to give you stuff like this. And just, you know, a semi-unhealthy looking tank. So, with that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe. Go check out Aquatic Support Systems on Facebook. Like that page. Lots of cool things coming, guys. Lots of cool things coming, and you definitely want to be a part of it. Go subscribe to all the members of Team Aquatic Support. Lots of great guys and one girl over there. Definitely a welcome sister to our brotherhood / sisterhood now. So make sure you check them out. Make sure you check out Aquatic Support Systems on Facebook. This is what I'm doing. This is what I've done. I hope y'all enjoyed today's video. Happy fish keeping, and stay true to the hobby, guys. Peace.